The stories are varied, and the next one is going to be entitled "The Bush Plane in Botswana," in Africa. And I was very, very fortunate to be invited to work on mental health issues in South Africa, and invited by a woman named Zane Wilson, who was a leading South African advocate for mental health services in a very, very complex country. So complex that when I was on the TV news at 6 o'clock, it was repeated 11 times because there are 11 languages, official languages, and they each get, the news gets repeated 11 times, which gives you an idea. And I'll just say one or two more words as introduction. One is, which reveals a little bit about myself. This was not a wealthy organization in South Africa that Zane led. And she offered me a first-class ticket. And when she told me how much it cost, even though it was a 18-hour and 49-minute nonstop flight from JFK, I just couldn't see spending all that money on a first-class ticket. But she said, okay, then we'll barter, which I really liked. And she had a lot of contacts. And she ended up saying, I was able to arrange a deal with somebody I know in Botswana for you to go on a 4-day safari. And I said, that sounds even better. So she said, we'll extend your visit, which was over 3 weeks in the planning. So I was extremely pleased with that. And when I was there, I met with government officials, leaders of the healthcare industry in South Africa, because they were redoing their healthcare systems, and very interested in actually what we had achieved in Vermont with the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Parity Bill. So in 2004, I headed out to South Africa for an amazing, life-changing adventure. On my first morning in Johannesburg, I met with mental health leaders and elected officials at a welcoming breakfast meeting. However, the occasion was marred by an elevator mishap, which caused some drama when I was caught between the floors in a malfunctioning lift. I arrived late for the meeting, dirty and disheveled. This rousing, nearly disastrous beginning reminded me that you only get one chance to make a first impression. After the session, I was introduced to Tabo, an older native who assisted Zane's organization as a driver. His English was better than my Zulu. Zulu was his African tribe. I had packed my bag, and as planned, we set out by car for Botswana, a journey of well over 5 hours. Before long, I learned about his youthful days growing up and living during the apartheid years, followed by the euphoria and freedom associated with the election in 1994 of Nelson Mandela to the nation's highest position. Tabo was an engaging and enthused storyteller, but his skills were not as advanced when it came to driving and following directions. He tended to speed up as we approached narrow rural roads, and in towns he sometimes missed or ignored red lights. As we approached the 5-hour mark, it was apparent that we were horribly lost. And as it turns out, we ended up bypassing the official border crossing. It took a while, but we finally found and drove to the entrance of the Safari Reserve. I checked in with the Game Reserve Rangers, a rugged and sturdy-looking crew who looked ready for any adventure out in the bush country. I was relieved and pleased when they found my reservation and assigned me to a small, quaint, rustic shelter, more of a hut than a formal dwelling. It consisted of 2 cozy rooms, as well as a most tiny toilet, augmented by an enormous outdoor bathtub that some white colonial ruler might have left behind. Before heading off, the ranger demanded that I not walk around our encampment unless accompanied by an armed staff member. He alluded to the tragedy of the previous year, but failed to offer specifics, although I thought about asking whether a guest eaten by a lion was entitled to a full or partial refund. Restraint seemed a better option, a strategy that was not always my strength. My dwelling was like a second home, graced with a rather romantic sleeping net enclosing my bed. A small but welcoming overhead fan provided cooling relief from the intense African heat. However, I had to remember to duck carefully when passing, since a beheading would ruin the day. On Sunday morning, upon our return from an early excursion and following a hearty breakfast, I decided to luxuriate in the large outdoor bathtub near my comfortable dwelling. Cheered on by a glorious sun and aided by some thick foliage that shielded me from my nearest safari neighbors, I went outside, stripped off my clothes, dropped them in a heap, and climbed into the beckoning tub. This was a moment of pure, unadulterated bliss. Besides the scenery and African ambience, being able to stretch out completely in an oversized tub is a rare and joyous occasion when one is well over 6 feet tall. After soaking for 10 minutes or so, I sensed a stirring in the surrounding brush that encircled my tub. To my amazement, 2 fearsome-looking baboons appeared. They stood there, some 30 feet away, looking at me with uncertain intent. I watched them, they watched me. Much to my surprise, shock might be more accurate. Within a minute or two, at least 40 or 50 baboons silently slid from the surrounding underbrush and gathered in an arc around my bathtub. Several of them started making guttural noises, while many of the young primates seemed animated or perhaps agitated by the scene. The troop slowly encircled me. As they did, I felt increasingly uneasy, vulnerable, alone, and out of my element, relying on basic instinct. And propelled by a growing sense of danger, perhaps panic, I extricated myself from the tub, rushed over to pick up my clothes, and bolted, naked, in full retreat towards my lodging. With the quick speed of an old athlete, I made it to the hut, rushed in, and slammed the door shut, using the bolt for added protection. There I was, the not so great or brave white hunter, peering through the curtains, naked as a jaybird, and checking once again to make sure the door was indeed tightly latched. Within a minute or two, after my impulsive and unsightly performance, the baboons quietly disappeared as they slid back into the brush. After what must have been a most entertaining morning for them, it occurred to me that Tarzan might not have approved of my fearful and timid reaction that left me vulnerable, especially without weapons or clothes.